Following the theme of today's conversation with education, I don't actually want to speak for very long. I'm very keen to have the Q&A and to hear your questions and any thoughts you might have or any fruit you want to throw at Tony and I when we're back here on stage. But what I really wanted to think about together with you is, what is the purpose of education? I think Tony actually made some interesting points. As you know, I don't actually identify as a conservative. I call myself politically non-binary. But I think the element of conservative thinking, particularly when it comes to education, is the preservation of tradition, time-tested tradition that has allowed us to be who we are, that has allowed us to be where we are. But I think that is actually not enough, because what we have to do is not only pass on the traditions that made us who we are and that put us where we are, but increasingly I feel that one of the things we're really struggling to do, particularly with young people, including my generation and younger, is to explain how we got here. And the question in that area for me is, why are we where we are? What do I mean by this? Well, how many young Australians are getting on rickety boats and braving shark-infested waters in search of a better life elsewhere? And until Tony's government, there were quite a lot of people who were keen to do that here. In the United States, there are millions of people who cross the southern border illegally every year, risking dealing with criminal cartels, the treacherous journey to get to a better life in the United States. In the UK, tens of thousands of people every year are braving the English Channel, and tens of thousands of people every year in Europe are risking their lives to cross the Mediterranean in order to get to a better life. Now, why is that? Why is that? Well, the difficulty is we have lost the ability to explain all of that. And the answer is actually very obvious, but it's very politically incorrect. And by the way, we talk a lot about political correctness in the West now, and we don't even know where that comes from. It comes from the same place as I do, the Soviet Union. Political correctness never had anything to do with protecting the rights of minorities or the feelings of people or preventing offense or comedians not being allowed to make jokes that other people didn't like, and had everything to do with something quite different. Political correctness was invented in the Soviet Union in order to be able to say, "Comrade, what you're saying is factually correct, but it is politically incorrect." And the point was to shut down discussion and in order to advance the party line, which is exactly how political correctness is used in the West today. Now, why do I say that the answer to the question of why are people risking their lives to come here, but we're not risking our lives to go anywhere else, is very simple and very obvious. It's because our countries are better. Sorry, they are better. And I don't mean that we are morally superior or we have a greater moral value than people in other countries. What I mean is we are able to produce more of the things that people seem to want than other societies. Safety, prosperity, the ability to choose your gender, all these important things. Now, why are we better at producing safety and prosperity? Well, there is many reasons, of course, and we won't have time for them all today. But I think the two things, one of them is being exercised outside of the doors of this room right now, actually, which is the freedom to bang doors. This is like a scene from Game of Thrones. They're going to start chanting shame in a second. Would you like me to use the microphone? No, I think people can hear me now. Yeah? Yeah. Perfect. Well, there we go. So, one of them is being exercised outside this room, which is, of course, freedom of expression. Now, when we talk about freedom of expression, including on this side of the argument, those of us who are for it, we often fail to explain why it is important. We simply talk about it as if it's some kind of unquestionable moral value. And I think it is important to explain why it works. Why it works is essentially this: you cannot think freely without speaking. You have to speak in order to be able to think. And when you speak, you very quickly find out, very often, that what you're saying is utter crap. You are confronted with the ideas of other people, and it is this sharpening of idea against idea that brings us closer to the truth. In science, in research, in technology, in cultural technology, which is something that we often massively underestimate. And freedom of expression is the bedrock of the success of the West. It is the reason that when Hernan Cortez turns up in Central America, he's able to overpower with only a few hundred men the Aztec empire of 6 million people. It is the reason, and something that people don't understand remotely in the West, is how many of you have seen Oppenheimer this year? It's a movie about the development of the Manhattan Project and the nuclear weapon. Now, one of the things that is hidden very much in the movie, because it's made by Hollywood people who lean certainly in one direction of the political spectrum, is that throughout the movie, what you see is these poor communists are being oppressed by the American Red Scare and all of this other stuff. And right at the end, they slip on the fact that the reason that Stalin got the nuclear bomb was because of communist spies in the West. And there's a great irony that the first nuclear weapon that was made by the Soviet Union was called RDS-1, which stands for Россия делает сама, which means Russia makes it by itself. Ironic, given that the nuclear weapons were stolen almost entirely from America. And the reason for that technological superiority that Western societies have enjoyed through the ages is the fact that we have freedom of expression and freedom of research comparatively more to other countries. And that is freedom from religious dogma, that is freedom from social dogma, and that is freedom from government tyranny too. And the second thing that is the bedrock of our success of our civilization that is also increasingly a threat is, of course, the capitalist model. Because once you have an idea, we have the incentive structure for you to take the idea into the world and to make that idea of service to other people on the guarantee that because we have property rights here in the West, you will get to keep the benefits of what you produce. This is not the case in other countries. This is not the case in Russia. There is no private property in Russia. Mikhail Khodorkovsky was the richest man in Russia. Then he gave some money to an opposition party, and he ceased being the richest man in Russia, and instead spent 10 years in a prison and was eventually exiled. And that kind of system that exists all over the world, whether it's communist Russia during the Soviet times, or simply corrupt Russia in modern times, whether it's the communist China, or whether it's corrupt regimes all over the world. In those systems, the incentive structure is different. If you do not get to keep the product of what you create, the incentive structure encourages you to comply, not to innovate. And the reason for our success in science and technology, which has been such a massive driver of our comparative success, the reason that people wish to come here, is that we have created the incentive structure through freedom of expression and through capitalism to be able to encourage people to innovate and to allow us to be much more sophisticated and much more advanced than other societies. So when we come to education, the passing down of this knowledge and the ability to say our societies are better is crucial to our future success. If we forget these things, we will not survive in the way that we are at the moment. And this is one of the reasons I'm so excited to come here and speak with you and continue our conversation with Freya and Tony in a minute. So thank you for taking the time to come out today.